She restores damaged paintings. He destroyed his own. Sarah Whitmore arrived in the old industrial quarter of London just before dusk, when the light turned metallic and the streets felt suspended between past and demolition. The building stood at the end of a narrow lane, brick blackened by decades of rain and soot, windows filmed with dust. According to the documents in her leather folder, the structure was scheduled for structural evaluation before potential resale. According to the rumors she had heard, it was where Marcus Levell had disappeared. She paused at the door, steadying her breath. 6 months earlier, she had walked out of a prestigious museum under a cloud of accusation because she refused to falsify a provenance report. She had chosen integrity over advancement, and the art world had quietly closed its doors to her. This job was supposed to be neutral. Assess the contents. Estimate value. Submit a report. No emotion. Inside, the air smelled of oil, turpentine, and neglect. Shafts of fading light cut across canvases stacked against walls, some slashed, some turned inward as if ashamed. In the center of the room stood a man in a paint-stained shirt, motionless, watching her as though she were an intruder in a sacred ruin. "You're not a buyer," he said. His voice was low, controlled. "No," she replied evenly. "I'm here to evaluate the building and its contents." Marcus Levell looked thinner than the photographs from his exhibition days, sharper at the edges. His eyes were alert but guarded. He did not extend a hand. "There's nothing here worth evaluating," he said. She moved slowly, careful not to disturb anything. One canvas caught her attention despite the deep diagonal cut across its surface. The composition beneath the damage was extraordinary. The layering of color, the restraint in the brushwork, the emotional weight embedded in the texture. It was not the work of a man who had lost his gift. It was the work of someone who had tried to destroy it. "Why did you cut them?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "Because they were finished." She understood what he meant. Finished meant ready for market, ready for contracts, ready to be owned. "I'm not here on behalf of any gallery," she said. "I was hired to assess whether the structure contains assets that affect its sale value. If you want privacy, I can state that the contents are non-commercial and advise demolition clearance." He studied her. Suspicion did not leave his face, but curiosity entered it. "You'd bury them," he said, "if that's your choice." Silence expanded between them. Outside, a train passed somewhere beyond the warehouses, the sound distant and hollow. She stepped closer to the slashed painting. "This isn't dead," she said. "It's wounded." He almost laughed, but the sound never fully formed. "Everything here is wounded." She turned toward him. "I'm a conservator. I specialize in structural and pigment restoration. If you allowed it, I could repair one. No contracts, no buyers, just to see whether you still want them gone." He stared at her as if she had proposed something dangerous. "You think you can fix it," he said. "I know how to repair canvas," she answered. "The rest is up to you." He hesitated long enough for her to see the internal conflict. Control had been taken from him before. Contracts signed during a breakdown. A marriage that blurred into management. A career that turned him into an asset. Letting her touch the work meant risking exposure again. "You repair one," he said finally. "Only one. And you don't photograph it. You don't contact anyone." "Agreed." He gestured toward the largest, slashed piece. "That one." She set her bag down and removed gloves, tools, adhesive strips, fine needles. Her movements were precise, economical. She explained each step without embellishment. Stabilizing the fibers, aligning the tear, reinforcing from the back so the scar remained visible but integrated. "Why leave the scar?" he asked. "Because erasing it would weaken the structure," she said. "The integrity comes from acknowledging where it broke." He watched her hands work. For the first time since she entered, his shoulders lowered slightly. "You talk like you've repaired more than canvas," he said. "I lost my position because I refused to fabricate history for a donor," she replied. "I chose the scar." He absorbed that. The room shifted, almost imperceptibly. Suspicion did not vanish, but it gained context. "You walked away," he said. "I was asked to lie," she corrected. Hours passed unnoticed. Outside, night settled fully over London. Inside, the tears slowly closed under her steady touch. When she stepped back, the painting no longer looked mutilated. The line of damage remained faintly visible, but it carried weight rather than ruin. Marcus approached it cautiously, as if afraid it would disappear. "It's different," he said. "It's honest," she replied. He looked at her then, really looked at her, measuring not her credentials, but her restraint. She had not asked about buyers. She had not mentioned exhibitions. She had not taken photographs. She had simply worked. "You're not like the others," he said. She almost smiled. "Neither are you." The electricity in the room shifted again, this time warmer, more dangerous. Two people who had chosen principle over comfort stood facing each other in a studio that felt less like a tomb and more like a threshold. "You'll need better lighting if you continue," she said, returning to professional neutrality. "Continue," he repeated. "You have more than one wounded piece." He turned back to the painting, eyes tracing the restored surface. "For now," he said slowly, "this one stays." She packed her tools carefully. At the door, she paused. "I'll file my structural report tomorrow," she said. "It will state that the building contains non-transferable personal property and requires owner consultation before any sale." He nodded once. When she stepped back into the cold London night, she felt something she had not felt in months. Not hope, not yet, but direction. Inside the studio, Marcus remained before the repaired canvas long after she left. He touched the faint scar with his fingertips. It did not crumble. It did not bleed color. For the first time in years, he did not feel the urge to cut again. Sarah returned 2 days later, not because the contract required it, but because Marcus had sent a single message late at night. The painting held. That was all it said. She arrived earlier this time. Morning light filtered through the high windows, softer and more revealing than the metallic dusk of their first meeting. The studio still carried the scent of oil and dust, but something had shifted. The restored canvas now stood upright on an easel instead of facing the wall. Marcus stood beside it, arms crossed. "It didn't buckle," he said before she could speak. "The seam is stable." She stepped closer, examining the surface without touching it. The fibers had settled perfectly. The scar was visible only if one knew where to look. "Structural integrity restored," she said. "Emotional integrity is your department." A faint, reluctant curve touched his mouth. It disappeared quickly, but she had seen it. "I worked last night," he said. He gestured toward a smaller canvas on the table. Fresh pigment still glistened. The composition was raw, layered with deep blues fractured by thin veins of gold. It was unfinished, but alive. "You're painting again," she observed. "I didn't promise that," he replied. "You didn't have to." He watched her reaction carefully, as if expecting judgment or commercial calculation. She gave neither. "Why gold?" she asked. "Because cracks reflect light," he said. "If you force them to." She nodded slowly. "Then don't force them. Let them." Silence settled, not hostile this time. Intentional. He moved closer to the restored canvas. "You said the scar makes it stronger." "It redistributes tension," she answered. "When something breaks, the stress lines change. If you reinforce properly, the weakness becomes part of the structure." "You talk like everything can be repaired." "Not everything," she said. "Some things collapse. But this didn't." He studied her, searching for hidden agenda. "You're still writing the report?" "Yes. And I recommended a temporary hold on any sale until the contents are cataloged under your direct supervision." He blinked, surprised. "You could have marked it commercially viable." "I could have," she agreed. "And you didn't. I'm not here to sell you." The words lingered in the space between them, heavier than intended. He turned away first. "I don't do exhibitions anymore." "I didn't ask you to. But you're thinking it." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm thinking your work deserves air. Air leads to contracts. Not if you control the terms." He laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Control is a myth. Only if you surrender it." That struck deeper than she expected. His posture stiffened, but he didn't retreat. "You think I surrendered," he said quietly. "I think you were cornered." The difference mattered. He walked toward the far wall and pulled down another canvas. This one had been slashed more violently than the first. The damage crossed the central figure, distorting the face. "This was the last one before I stopped," he said. "They said it was my strongest period. My commercial peak." She approached carefully. "Do you want it repaired?" He hesitated. The question carried weight beyond the canvas. "Yes," he said finally, "but not erased." She unpacked her tools again. As she worked, he remained close, watching every motion. "Why did you really lose your job?" he asked. "I told you. You told me the clean version." She didn't stop stitching the fibers. "A donor purchased a painting with questionable provenance," she said evenly. "The board wanted certification to justify the acquisition." I refused. The report vanished. My position followed. And no one defended you. No one wanted to lose funding. He absorbed that. You could have signed it. Yes. And had a career. Yes. Why didn't you? She tightened a thread with deliberate precision. Because if the foundation is false, the whole structure collapses eventually. He watched her hands. And what if no one cares whether it collapses? Then I do. The admission hung raw in the air. Outside, traffic hummed faintly through the old windows. Inside, the only sound was the soft pull of thread through canvas. He stepped closer. You know what they told me during the divorce? He said quietly. That I needed management. That I wasn't built for the market. That my instability required supervision. And you believed them. For a while. Her hands paused. You signed control away. I was tired, he admitted. There it was. Not weakness. Exhaustion. She resumed working. Tired people make binding decisions. That doesn't mean they're permanent. He leaned against the table, closer now than before. You think I can take it back? I think you never fully gave it. The repair progressed slowly. She reinforced the backing, aligning torn paint layers with almost surgical focus. He watched not just the technique, but the patience. You're careful, he said. Care prevents future damage. Or delays it. Depends on what you build afterward. When she finished, the second canvas bore a visible seam across the fractured face. It did not hide the violence. It integrated it. He exhaled, long and controlled. It looks stronger. It is. He stepped nearer, their shoulders almost touching as they examined the surface. You stayed, he said quietly. I said I would. No one does that. She looked at him, really looked at him this time. I do. The space between them narrowed. Not dramatic. Not reckless. Just inevitable. He lifted his hand toward the repaired seam, then hesitated. Go ahead, she said softly. His fingers brushed the surface lightly. The canvas did not tremble. Neither did she when his hand lowered and remained close to hers. For a moment, the studio felt less like a shelter from the world and more like a place where something new could begin. I started another one this morning, he said. Show me. He turned the fresh canvas toward her. The composition was incomplete, but at its center was a single vertical fracture line illuminated with gold. What's it called? She asked. He considered. Beauty of Scars, he said. She met his gaze, and this time neither of them looked away. 3 days later, the studio door opened without warning. Sarah was cataloging pigments at the long wooden table, while Marcus worked in silence, layering muted reds beneath the gold-veined fracture of Beauty of Scars. Morning light cut sharply across the floor. The atmosphere had settled into a fragile rhythm. Work, brief conversation, shared focus. The click of heels against concrete fractured it. Both of them turned. Eleanor Crane entered as if the building already belonged to her. Tailored charcoal coat, leather folder in hand. No hesitation in her stride. Marcus went still. Sarah Whitmore, Eleanor said, her voice smooth and controlled. I was wondering how long it would take before someone professional found him. Sarah did not rise immediately. She closed the pigment jar first. Then she stood. You're trespassing, Marcus said. I still hold partial contractual interest in all commercial representations of your work, Eleanor replied evenly. That includes spaces in which it is produced if tied to exhibition intent. There is no exhibition, Marcus said. Eleanor's eyes shifted briefly to the restored canvases, then to the new work drying near the window. There will be, she said calmly. Silence thickened. Sarah spoke first. This is a private workspace evaluation under property review. No commercial activity has occurred. Eleanor's gaze settled fully on her now. Cool. Appraising. Yes, she said. I'm aware of your recent employment history. The slight pause before the last word was deliberate. Marcus's jaw tightened, but Sarah stood her ground. Eleanor didn't blink. She simply placed a document on the table with surgical precision. Section 4.2, Eleanor said. A 10-year exclusivity clause for all public displays. Signed and notarized. Signed under duress, Marcus countered. Signed in the presence of counsel, she corrected. And if these restored works leave this room, intent activates the clause. You don't get to define your legacy anymore, Marcus. The law does. The air felt colder. Sarah met Marcus's eyes briefly, a silent question. He gave no signal, but his shoulders were rigid with restrained anger. You received notification of property assessment, Eleanor continued. Naturally, I investigated. It would be unfortunate if contractual violations complicated the building's sale. There is no sale, Marcus said. There will be, she repeated. Sarah finally picked up the document. Her eyes moved quickly across the language. The clause was tight, broad, designed to trap. You positioned this during his medical leave, Sarah said. I ensured continuity of brand value during instability, Eleanor replied. Marcus let out a sharp breath. You mean when I couldn't tell the difference between a canvas and a wall? You were not in a position to manage negotiations, she said evenly. I was. The statement hung between them like an incision. Sarah placed the document back down. What do you want? Marcus asked. Eleanor's gaze softened, not with warmth, but with strategy. I want what is legally structured, she said. If you intend to return to production, it will be through Crane Gallery. Properly curated, properly monetized. And if I don't, then you remain invisible, which, based on the past 2 years, seems to suit you. Marcus stepped forward, tension radiating from him. I'm not your asset. No, she agreed calmly. You're my contracted artist. Sarah stepped between them slightly, not protective, but stabilizing. There has been no public showing, she said. No sale, no circulation. Yet, Eleanor said. Her eyes shifted again to the restored pieces. You've repaired them, she observed to Sarah. Interesting choice. The destroyed phase was selling well. They're not products, Sarah said quietly. They are exactly that, Eleanor replied. Scarcity drives value. Isolation builds myth. Pain markets beautifully. Marcus flinched almost imperceptibly. Sarah noticed. You're not concerned about his well-being, Sarah said. You're concerned about inventory. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. And you, she said softly, are concerned about redemption. A precise strike. Marcus looked at Sarah then, something flickering in his expression. Doubt? Curiosity? Eleanor continued smoothly. You were dismissed from your museum post under ethical controversy. Re-entry into the institutional art world will not be simple. Sarah held her ground. Integrity isn't controversy. It is when funding is involved. Marcus's silence grew heavier. Eleanor closed the folder. I'm not here to argue, she said. I'm here to remind you both that any public activation of his work without my gallery's mediation will result in injunction. Immediate and costly. She turned toward Marcus. You always hated logistics, she said almost gently. You prefer emotion. Leave structure to those equipped for it. He didn't answer. After a moment, she walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, she added. If you intend to restore the brand, do it correctly. Amateur handling will only depress future value. The door shut behind her with controlled finality. The studio remained silent for several seconds. Marcus's breathing was steady but tight. She monitors everything, he said. Of course she does, Sarah replied. He looked at the restored canvas, then at the new one drying. You heard her, he said. Anything public becomes leverage. There's been nothing public, Sarah said. Not yet. He walked to the window, staring out at the street below. She'll assume you're planning something, he added. I'm not planning an exhibition, Sarah said evenly. He turned toward her slowly. Why are you here? The question landed heavier than intended. You invited me, she said. That's not what I meant. She met his gaze without retreat. I'm here because the work deserves light, she said. And because you do. The vulnerability in the room shifted again, but this time it carried tension beneath it. Eleanor had not shouted. She had not threatened emotionally. She had introduced law, structure, control. Marcus looked down at his hands, faint traces of gold pigment still along his fingers. She built the market around me, he said quietly. Without her, there is no infrastructure. And with her? Sarah asked. He didn't answer. The fracture line in Beauty of Scars glimmered faintly in the morning light. The studio no longer felt hidden. It felt watched. The days after Eleanor's visit did not explode into chaos. They tightened. Marcus worked longer hours, his silence heavy with the legal threat hanging over the studio. He began a new series, fractures running through human silhouettes, illuminated with gold leaf. I need to know if I can finish something without her permission, he told Sarah one evening. He looked at the restored Beauty of Scars, then at her. The kiss that followed wasn't a beginning, it was a pact. The piece broke a week later. Eleanor entered without knocking, her charcoal coat a cold shadow against the gold-veined canvases. She didn't remove her gloves. You're persistent, she said calmly. Sarah didn't look up immediately. You're trespassing again. I prefer to think of it as oversight. Sarah finished tightening the brace before standing. Marcus isn't here. I know. There was no pretense in her voice. Eleanor stepped further inside, her gaze traveling across the room. The transformation was undeniable now. The canvases were upright. The light fixtures had been cleaned. New works leaned, drying along the wall. You've reactivated him faster than I expected, she said. I didn't reactivate anything, Sarah replied. He paints because he chooses to. Choice is romantic language, Eleanor said. Influence is more accurate. She placed a slim envelope on the table between them. I didn't come to argue, she continued. I came to propose efficiency. Sarah didn't touch the envelope. You're aware, Eleanor said, that your professional reinstatement is unlikely without advocacy. Museum boards talk. Donors talk louder. Sarah met her gaze steadily. Get to the point. I can arrange a return, Eleanor said. Not to your previous institution, but to a larger one. International scope. Curatorial authority restored. Sarah's expression did not shift. In exchange, she asked, you convince Marcus to formalize a new agreement. Updated terms. My gallery retains exclusive representation, but he receives a higher percentage and creative veto rights. And control. Eleanor's lips curved slightly. Control is shared in any functional partnership. You mean retained by you, Sarah said. I mean structured. Silence stretched. Eleanor stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're intelligent, she said. You understand that genius without infrastructure collapses. You also understand that your own credibility is compromised. We can repair both problems simultaneously. Sarah finally picked up the envelope. Inside was a preliminary contract draft and a printed letter from a major European museum expressing conditional interest in her candidacy, contingent on professional endorsement. It was real. You move quickly, Sarah said. I move decisively. You've already spoken to them. Yes. Before speaking to me, I assumed you would listen. Sarah folded the document carefully and placed it back in the envelope. You think I came here for leverage, Eleanor said. I think you're afraid, Sarah replied calmly. That landed. Eleanor's expression cooled further. Of what? Of losing narrative control. A flicker. Brief. Controlled. You're sentimental, Eleanor said. That makes you predictable. And you're transactional, Sarah answered. That makes you lonely. The tension sharpened. This is not about loneliness, Eleanor said evenly. It is about legacy. Marcus's work is valuable. With proper positioning, this series alone could restore him to the international stage. And at what cost? Sarah asked. At the cost of discipline. You mean obedience. Eleanor's patience thinned. You're in love with him, she said flatly. Sarah did not deny it. That clouds judgment, Eleanor continued. You believe you're protecting him, but you're isolating him from infrastructure. Without representation, he will be litigated into obscurity. Sarah's pulse tightened, but her voice remained steady. He doesn't belong to you. He signed an agreement. During a breakdown. It was legal. It was exploitative. Eleanor stepped closer, close enough that her voice no longer needed projection. Here is the reality, she said softly. If he attempts public exhibition without gallery mediation, I will seek injunction. Immediate freeze of assets. Confiscation of works pending litigation. Years of court proceedings. Sarah's jaw tightened. And if he signs? She asked. He regains market visibility. You regain institutional legitimacy. Everyone wins. Except him. Eleanor studied her. You underestimate his ambition. I think you misunderstand it. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Marcus entered seconds later, carrying rolled canvas and a bag of supplies. He stopped when he saw them facing each other. What is this? He asked. Eleanor turned smoothly toward him. Opportunity, she said. Sarah stepped back slightly, not retreating, repositioning. She's offering a revised contract, Sarah said evenly. Higher percentage. Exclusive representation retained. Marcus's eyes shifted between them. And he asked. She's also offering to restore my museum career, Sarah added. Silence detonated quietly. Marcus looked at her sharply. In exchange for what? For convincing you to sign. The air thickened. Eleanor watched his reaction with surgical calm. And are you convinced? Marcus asked Sarah. Her answer came without delay. No. Eleanor's gaze hardened. You're refusing advancement, she said to Sarah. I'm refusing control disguised as generosity. Marcus placed the supplies on the table slowly. What happens if I don't sign? He asked Eleanor. I pursue enforcement, she replied. Legally, publicly, and if I do, you regain scale. He looked at the canvases around the room, the restored scars, the gold fractures, the fresh paint still drying. I don't want scale, he said quietly. Eleanor's composure thinned for the first time. You want obscurity? She asked. I want autonomy. The words settled heavily. You are not equipped to manage autonomy, she said. That's not your decision anymore. Silence. Eleanor closed the folder deliberately. You're making a mistake, she said. Maybe, Marcus replied. But it will be mine. Her gaze shifted one last time to Sarah. You've chosen a fragile man over a stable future, she said coldly. I chose integrity, Sarah answered. Eleanor's eyes flicked briefly to the restored canvases, then back to Marcus. This isn't over, she said. No, he agreed. It isn't. She left without another word. The door shut. For several seconds, neither Sarah nor Marcus moved. You didn't hesitate, he said finally. About what? The offer. She stepped closer to him. I already lost my career once for refusing to lie, she said softly. I'm not trading it for you. He studied her carefully. For me, he asked. For what we're building, she corrected. He exhaled slowly, tension easing but not disappearing. She'll escalate, he said. I know. He looked around the studio, at the work, at the fragile progress, at the risk. Then back at her. Then we prepare, he said. For the first time since Eleanor's arrival in their lives, they were not reacting. They were choosing. The escalation was quiet. 3 days later, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a stack of printed emails. Marcus opened them alone. They were dated 2 months before Sarah's first visit, a clinical exchange between her and a rival gallery director. The language was strategic. Clinical. Discussion of isolated assets, psychological leverage, and timed reintroduction to market. Marcus read every line twice. The timestamps aligned. The names were real. The phrasing sounded professional enough to be plausible. His chest tightened. He did not call Sarah immediately. Instead, he sat in the studio for nearly an hour, staring at the restored canvas, the first one she had repaired. The scar line glimmered faintly under afternoon light. He plugged in the USB drive. Inside were scanned clippings about her museum dismissal. Headlines framed as ethical controversy. Quotes from board members suggesting procedural irregularities. Carefully selected to imply guilt without stating it. The narrative was coherent. Too coherent. When Sarah arrived that evening, she knew something was wrong before he spoke. The studio felt colder. The canvases were turned inward again, not hidden, but withdrawn. You got something, she said quietly. He didn't answer immediately. He handed her the papers. She read them once, then again more slowly. Her pulse rose, but her expression stayed controlled. This is fabricated, she said. The email addresses are real, he replied. Yes. The dates align. Yes. They reference your first visit here. She met his eyes. I did not write these. Silence pressed between them. You understand how this looks, he said. Yes. You approached me. You offered restoration. You gained access. Now there's evidence you discussed, psychological leverage. Her jaw tightened slightly. I don't manipulate artists, she said. That's not what this suggests. The restraint in his voice hurt more than accusation would have. She stepped closer, but he remained still. Look at the formatting, she said, pointing to the printed email headers. The metadata spacing is inconsistent. The signature block uses a template I've never used. The tone is wrong. You expect me to analyze typography right now? He asked, frustration edging in. I expect you to analyze me, she answered. That struck. He looked away briefly. I have been managed before, he said quietly. I have been studied. Positioned. Sold. I'm not her, she said. How do I know? The question landed heavy and unfiltered. For a moment, something inside her fractured. You know because I refused her offer, she said. You were there. She could have anticipated that, he countered. Sacrificed the small gain to secure the larger one. She stared at him, disbelief flickering across her face. You think I'd dismantle my own career again as part of a long strategy? I don't know what to think, he said honestly. The honesty cut deeper than suspicion. She placed the papers on the table carefully. If I wanted leverage, she said, voice steady but colder now. I would have documented every canvas, contacted collectors, leaked your location the first week. You didn't, he said. Exactly. Silence. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the studio. She knows how to construct narrative, he muttered. She built mine. And now she's building one about me, Sarah replied. He stopped pacing. What if some of it is true? He asked quietly. What if part of you came here because restoring me restores you? The words hung in the air. She didn't flinch. Yes, she said. He blinked. Yes, he repeated. Of course restoring your work matters to me, she continued. Of course helping you rebuild affects my own sense of purpose. I'm human, but that doesn't mean I'm using you. He held her gaze, searching for fracture lines. You benefit if I return, he said. I benefit if you're whole, she replied. Whether anyone else sees it or not. The tension didn't dissipate. It thickened. You should leave, he said finally. The words were quiet, controlled. She inhaled slowly. You believe this, she said. I don't know what I believe, he answered. And that's the problem. She nodded once. I won't beg you to trust me, she said. Trust isn't negotiated. She moved toward the restored canvas, the first one, and touched the faint seam lightly. You asked me why I didn't fabricate a museum report, she said softly. Because once you lie about structure, collapse becomes inevitable. He didn't speak. I won't defend myself against fiction, she continued. But I will say this. If you choose her narrative over your experience of me, that's your decision. Her voice did not break. That made it worse. He watched as she gathered her tools from the table, slowly, methodically, not fleeing, not dramatic. At the door she paused. The metadata on that drive will show you the truth, she said at the door. If you decide to look. She left, and the studio collapsed into a suffocating silence. Marcus stood alone among the canvases, looking at the stack of emails, then at the restored scar on his painting. He pressed his thumb against the seam. It held, but doubt was a different kind of fracture. He didn't sleep. He spent the night under the harsh white glare of the studio lights. The printed papers spread across the table like evidence in a trial he never wanted to hold. He replayed every conversation with Sarah in his head, every hesitation, every look, every moment she had chosen silence over persuasion. If she were manipulating him, she was doing it without pushing. That unsettled him more. At 3 a.m, he plugged the USB drive back into his laptop. He opened the email files, this time not reading the content, but inspecting the data. Creation timestamps, file origin, embedded author tags. The files had been generated 48 hours earlier, 2 days after Eleanor's offer. His jaw tightened. He checked the header routing paths. The domain signatures were close to authentic, but not identical. One character altered in the internal server address. Subtle. Intentional. It was fabrication. Clean. Professional. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen. Not doubt. Strategy. He remembered the way Eleanor had said, "You're in love with him," as if love were a liability to be exploited. He looked at the restored canvas again. The scar line caught the early morning light. He had almost believed it. The realization didn't bring relief. It brought anger. By noon he was outside Crane Gallery. The building stood polished and deliberate in a central London district, glass facade reflecting status and capital. Marcus had not walked through those doors in over 2 years. He entered without appointment. Assistants froze when they saw him. Eleanor emerged from her office within seconds, composed as always. "I wondered how long," she said calmly. "You sent them," he said. "I send many things." "The emails." She tilted her head slightly. "You seem agitated." "They were fabricated." "Prove it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The metadata shows file creation 2 days ago, after your offer." Her eyes did not flicker. "You've been researching digital forensics?" she asked. "I've been learning not to trust surface narratives." A faint smile touched her mouth. "Impressive," she said. "Growth suits you." "Why?" he asked. "Because she destabilizes you," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Attachment creates unpredictability. You are most valuable when controlled." "I'm not inventory," he said sharply. "You are an artist," she corrected. "Which, in this market, is synonymous." He stared at her. "You almost convinced me she was using me," he said. "I provided plausible doubt," she replied. "The rest came from you." That hit harder than denial would have. "You exploited my fracture," he said quietly. "I leveraged probability," she answered. "You distrust easily." That is not my creation. He held her gaze. No, he said, but it is no longer yours to use. For the first time, something close to irritation surfaced in her expression. You are bound contractually, she reminded him. Then we renegotiate publicly, he said. Publicly, she repeated. Yes. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That would invite scrutiny. Exactly. Silence. He continued, voice steady now. You built a narrative around my instability. You controlled access, supply, myth. If I go public about the terms under which that contract was signed, it becomes a question of exploitation. Her composure recalibrated. You have no proof of coercion, she said. I have medical records, he replied. Documented psychiatric leave during signing period. That weakens enforceability. A pause. You've been advised, she observed. I've been thinking. They stood facing each other across the polished floor. You're making an emotional decision, she said. No, he replied. I'm making an autonomous one. He turned to leave. If you attempt unauthorized exhibition, she called after him, I will file injunction within hours. He stopped at the door, but didn't turn around. Then I won't sell, he said. I'll show. That distinction won't protect you. It will protect the art. He left without waiting for response. By the time he reached Sarah's apartment, his anger had settled into a cold, hard clarity. When she opened the door, he didn't wait for her to speak. The files were created 48 hours ago, he said. It was her. I'm sorry I let her make me doubt what's right in front of me. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, her expression weary. You believed it because you're used to being hunted, Marcus. But trust isn't a file you can verify. Then let's give her something real to hunt, he said, stepping into the light of the hallway. A public exhibition. No sales, no gallery, no Eleanor. If she wants to stop me, she'll have to do it in public. Sarah looked at him, searching for the man who had been hiding in the industrial quarter. She found someone else. It won't be clean, she warned. It never was, he replied, and followed her inside. For this to work, she continued, we need documentation. Timeline. Medical records. Contract copies. Evidence of coercive negotiation. I can access my files. And I'll prepare a legal analysis of the representation clause. He nodded. And Marcus, she added. Yes. If we do this, it's not revenge. It's reclamation, he said. She held his gaze a moment longer, measuring conviction against impulse. Finally, she nodded once. Then we prepare, she said. Outside, London moved through another ordinary evening. Inside, something shifted again. Not just love. Alignment. By the time the exhibition date arrived, the studio had been meticulously catalogued. Every document was ready. Marcus stood at the entrance of the warehouse they had leased under a third party. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for instructions. He was waiting for the light to hit the canvas. The warehouse doors opened at noon. There were no tickets, no gatekeepers. When Eleanor arrived with her legal team, she was met not with silence, but with a public ledger of her own coercion. The injunction she sought became a headline she couldn't suppress, the price of silence. Weeks later, their new gallery in East London became a permanent threshold for those who had been managed into obscurity. Marcus no longer painted for the market. He painted for the light. Is it real? He asked Sarah as they stood before the final piece of the night. Every scar of it, she replied. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the quiet victory within. Inside, Marcus and Sarah finally exhaled. The story was not about contracts, manipulation, or fear. It was about survival, trust, and the reclamation of life, love, and art. And for the first time in years, Marcus smiled freely, and Sarah smiled with him, scars intact, hearts aligned, and the future unwritten but entirely their own.